You actually read the whole article or just the headline?
The headline. If I'm honest, the headline and maybe the first sentence.
That's what I thought, because the headline alone, if you sit with it for a minute, there's a lot happening in those few words.
I mean, I saw the number, nearly 700,000. That's a significant number.
It is, and that word nearly is doing real work there. Do you know what I mean by that?
I think so. It means not quite 700,000.
Exactly. Nearly means you're close to the number, but it could be a little less. It couldn't be more. So nearly 700,000, the real number is probably 680,000, 690,000, somewhere in that range.
And that matters?
It matters because the writer chose that word deliberately. If they'd written around 700,000, that's different.
How is it different?
Around means it could be less or it could be more. So around 700,000 might mean 650,000, might mean 730,000. You don't know which direction you're off.
I genuinely never thought about that difference. I've been reading the news for, 15 years, and those words went past me.
Most people read past them. That's the thing. The language in news writing is incredibly precise. Every word is chosen for a reason, but we read it so fast that it just becomes noise.
So nearly is more precise in a sense. You know you're below the number.
Right. And around or approximately, which are synonyms of each other, those are vaguer. They're honest about not knowing which direction the real number falls.
That's actually a really useful thing to know, because I use around all the time in conversation without thinking about it.
Everyone does, and it's fine. Around is perfectly natural. I'll meet you around 8. You wouldn't say, I'll meet you nearly 8.
No, that would sound very strange. Nearly 8? What does that even mean?
It would mean you're going to arrive just before 8, I suppose, but nobody says that.
Okay, so nearly works with numbers and quantities. Around works with times, numbers, both?
Both, but the key thing with around and approximately, if you want to use them with a time, you have to think about your prepositions. You'd say, I'll meet you around 8, but if you use approximately, you need the preposition in. I'll meet you at approximately 8. You can't drop the at with approximately the way you can with around.
Interesting. So there are grammar rules hiding inside these little words that nobody ever explains.
Hidden everywhere. And this is just the headline. We haven't even got to the rest of the article.
All right, what's the next word that stopped you?
Displaced.
Nearly 700,000 displaced.
Yes. Now, here's the thing. They didn't write displaced people, just displaced on its own.
Is that grammatically correct?
It is, because displaced is working as an adjective there. It describes people, but the noun is implied. It's obvious from context. If you're writing about 700,000 human beings, you don't need to add the word people. The reader already knows.
So the adjective can stand alone when the noun it's describing is understood.
Exactly. And the adjective itself, displaced, carries so much meaning. If you're displaced, it means you've been removed from your home, usually by force. A conflict, a war, sometimes a natural disaster. You didn't leave because you wanted to, you were forced out.
It's a very clinical word for something that devastating, isn't it?
That's the thing about news language. It has to be precise and it has to be efficient, but sometimes the efficiency of it makes you forget what the word actually means.
So displaced and uprooted, are those the same thing?
Very close. The article uses both. Uprooted appears a little later, adding to the tens of thousands already uprooted from previous escalations.
Uprooted, like a tree.
Exactly like a tree. Think about it. A tree that's been in the ground for years has deep roots. Its whole life is in that place. And if you pull it out, everything is disrupted.
That's a much more human image than displaced.
It is, and uprooted is used in everyday life too, not only in crisis situations. You'd say, I'm not going to uproot my entire life for a job opportunity. You'd say that if someone asked you to move somewhere you didn't want to go.
And that sounds negative, right? Uprooted. Like it's something you're resisting.
Always negative. So if you're moving somewhere and you're excited about it, I'm going abroad, I want a fresh start, you'd never say, I'm uprooting myself.
Start fresh. That's a phrase I actually use.
It's a good one. New surroundings, new people, new daily routine, starting fresh.
But not uprooting.
Not uprooting. One sounds like a choice you're making. The other sounds like something that's happening to you.
That's a really clear distinction. I'll remember that.
Good, because these are the kinds of words that come up constantly in conversation, not just in news articles.
What about escalates? The headline ends with, as Middle East crisis escalates.
Yes, escalates means it's becoming worse, more severe. If a situation escalates, it's going in the wrong direction. It's getting harder to contain.
You'd use it at work too, like if a problem escalates.
Absolutely. If a disagreement between two colleagues isn't addressed, it can escalate. If a technical issue isn't fixed, it can escalate into something much bigger.
And in the article, it's escalates because crisis is singular.
Exactly. The subject is singular, the crisis, it, so the verb gets the S. It escalates.
I really did read that headline in about 3 seconds this morning.
Most people do. That's the whole point. These headlines are written to be absorbed quickly, but if you slow down even slightly, there's so much more there. What about inside the article? You mentioned the article itself had some phrases that caught your attention. Several. The one that hit me first was this: in Lebanon alone.
In Lebanon alone.
Yes, that word alone is carrying a lot of weight. It means only in Lebanon, not other places, only there. Nearly 700,000 people, including around 200,000 children, have been forced from their homes in Lebanon alone.
So when they add alone like that at the end, they're saying, and this is just one country. This is just one part of the picture.
And the number shifts completely when you understand that.
Yeah, it does.
The passive construction is interesting here too. Have been forced from their homes. Not they left, not they moved. They have been forced.
The subject isn't doing the action.
Right. The people are receiving the action. Something external, the conflict, the crisis, is doing it to them. The passive makes that very clear.
I didn't realize how much grammar was doing in a sentence like that.
Every choice in that sentence is intentional, and that's what I want to keep reading through with you, because there's a lot more.
I'm not going anywhere.
There's a phrase a little further into the article that I keep coming back to: echoing the deep concerns.
Echoing. Like a sound bouncing off a wall?
Exactly that image. But when you echo something in a conversation or in writing, it means you're repeating the same view. You agree with it. You're reflecting it back.
So if I say the situation is serious and you say, yes, I echo that, you mean you think the same.
Precisely. And in the article, the UN official is echoing what the international community has already said. He's not introducing a new idea. He's confirming and amplifying an existing one.
So it's stronger than just agreeing.
A little stronger. To echo something implies that the thought is spreading, being repeated in different places, getting louder.
And then deep concerns. That word deep is interesting. You wouldn't normally put deep in front of concerns.
It's an intensifier. Deep concerns means serious, significant concerns. The same way you'd say, I'm deeply sorry. You're not just sorry, you're really sorry. The depth adds weight.
And the article uses it more than once.
It does. Later on, there's deep economic uncertainty. Same idea. You're not just uncertain, you're seriously uncertain. The situation is significant.
What about warned of? I saw that structure, warned of wider secondary impacts, and I wasn't completely sure I understood it.
It's a slightly formal construction. Warn of something means you're giving advance notice that something negative may happen. You're flagging a risk before it arrives.
And in everyday speech, you'd use it differently?
In conversation, you're more likely to say, warn someone that something will happen. My teacher warned me that the exam would be difficult. You warn a person and then you tell them what to expect.
So the grammar after warn changes depending on whether you're saying warn of or warn someone.
Exactly. Warn of is followed by a noun or a gerund, the ing form of a verb. Experts warned of flooding, experts warned of disruption. But warn someone is followed by a full clause, a subject and a verb. My teacher warned me that the test would be hard. The whole structure of the sentence shifts.
That's the kind of thing that trips people up, isn't it? The same verb behaving differently depending on what comes after it.
All the time. And if you're not sure which construction to use, the safest one in conversation is always warn someone that something will happen. It's natural, it's clear, and you'll never go wrong with it.
My boss warned me that the presentation needed to be longer.
Perfect, exactly that. And in the article, the wider impacts, wider meaning
More significant, spreading further. Imagine a crack in a wall. If it gets wider, it's affecting more of the surface. Wider secondary impacts means the consequences are reaching further than they currently appear to be. And secondary impacts, those are knock-on effects.
yes, which is actually a phrase the article uses as well, knock-on delays. It's a slightly specialist term, but the idea is straightforward. One thing goes wrong, and as a direct result, something else goes wrong. It's a chain reaction.
I know that feeling from the office. One thing slips and everything behind it shifts.
That's exactly it. And that word slips is interesting too, because the article uses it. The focus on existing crises is slipping even further down the list.
Slipping. Not being moved, not being changed deliberately.
That's the key. Slipping implies it's happening without anyone consciously choosing it. Nobody decided to care less about those other crises. They just got pushed further down because something more urgent arrived.
Which is different from saying the focus has been moved down.
Completely different. If you move something down a list, that's a decision. If it slips, it's an accident. And that distinction matters enormously in how we understand what's happening.
There's an expression, that slipped my mind.
Yes, same root idea. It slipped my mind means I forgot, but with the implication that it wasn't intentional. It didn't happen because you didn't care. It just moved out of focus.
You'd say that if your boss asked about a report and you realized you'd forgotten it.
And you wanted to make clear it wasn't on purpose. I'm so sorry, it completely slipped my mind. It softens the admission without removing the accountability.
What about slipped through the cracks? I've heard that one.
Very common. If something slips through the cracks, it means it was missed. It fell between the gaps of your attention or your process. So the report didn't just slip your mind, it slipped through the cracks of your whole system.
That one is slightly worse, isn't it? Slipped my mind sounds more forgivable.
It does. Slipped my mind is personal. I forgot. Slipped through the cracks is systemic. Our process failed.
And both of them carry that sense of it being unintentional. It wasn't on purpose.
Always. That's what makes slip the right word in both cases. The moment you do something intentionally, slip is the wrong verb.
What else did the article have? You mentioned something about along with.
Yes, the article uses along with quite a lot, and it's worth understanding what work it's doing. Is it just another way of saying and? Not quite. And puts two things on equal footing. Along with introduces something that's additional but slightly secondary. You're saying, here's the main thing, and here's something else worth mentioning, but it's not quite at the same level.
So if I say I had coffee along with a biscuit, the coffee is the main thing.
Exactly. The biscuit is there, it's real, you want people to know about it, but it's not the headline.
And in the article, the main point is one thing, and the along with adds detail that's connected but less urgent.
Less urgent or slightly distinct. It's a very useful phrase in writing and in conversation because it lets you layer information without making everything seem equally important.
I think I've been using and for everything when I should have been using along with for some of it.
Most people do. And is the default. Along with is the upgrade.
There's so much in this article. Every paragraph has something.
There really is, and we're not even at the part about halt yet. Halt.
I know that word.
Do you know when to use it, though? Because it's not the same as stop, even though that's the simplest translation.
I've only really heard it in, I don't know, old films. Halt, who goes there?
Exactly. It has that authoritative weight. To halt something means to bring it completely to a stop, and there's usually an external force involved. Something causes the halting.
So you wouldn't say, I halted work at 5 o'clock.
It would sound very strange. That's just stopping. But if you said, the storm halted all train services, that works perfectly. The storm is the external force. The stopping is total and forceful.
Floods halted the match.
Perfect. Natural, clear, exactly right.
And the article says attacks have practically halted trade.
Practically, which means not entirely, but almost completely. Maybe 90–95%. Practically halted is more honest than saying completely halted. It leaves room for the small amount of trade that is still getting through.
And practically is a synonym for nearly in that sense.
Very close. You're practically finished, you're nearly finished. Almost interchangeable in that context.
But I wouldn't say nearly halted.
You could, technically, but practically halted is the more natural pairing. Some combinations just sound right together.
Language is strange.
It is, but that's also why it's worth paying attention to. There's one more phrase from the article I want to come back to. Linked to.
As in, connected to?
Exactly. The article talks about rising fuel prices linked to higher oil costs. Two things are not just happening at the same time, they're causally connected. One is causing the other.
So linked to is stronger than just alongside or at the same time as.
Much stronger. If I say fuel prices rose and oil costs rose, I'm describing two events. If I say fuel prices rose linked to higher oil costs, I'm telling you one caused the other.
That's the difference between correlation and causation in one phrase.
Exactly. And it's useful in conversation, too. If your colleague asks why a project is delayed, you wouldn't say the delay happened at the same time as a technical problem. You'd say the delay is linked to the technical issue we had last week.
And that lands very differently. It tells the listeners something about why, not just what.
Always. Linked to explains the relationship between things. It does a lot of work in a short phrase.
What about highlighted? UN agencies also highlighted supply chain disruptions. That's the word that means...
Think of a physical highlighter, a marker you use to make something stand out on a page. To highlight something in speech or in writing means you're drawing attention to it deliberately. You want the reader to notice it more than they might otherwise.
So when the UN highlights something, they're saying, pay attention to this matters.
Exactly. And the word choice tells you something about intention. They didn't just mention it. They didn't just note it. They highlighted it. They actively wanted it seen.
You'd use that in a meeting, wouldn't you? I want to highlight one concern before we move on.
Perfect. And it's professional without being stiff. It signals that what comes next is important. People listen differently after you say, I want to highlight.
And there's also that phrase from toward the end, make greater use of.
Yes, the UN agency has increasingly made greater use of overland routes. It means they're using something more than they used to.
But that's a very formal way of saying use more.
Very formal. In conversation, you'd just say they've been using overland routes more. Simple, direct, natural.
So make greater use of is for reports, formal emails, presentations.
That's exactly where it belongs. If your manager writes, you need to make greater use of the available resources, that's a formal instruction in writing. If they said it to you across a desk, they'd almost certainly just say, you need to use what you have more effectively.
So knowing that phrase helps you read formal documents easier, even if you wouldn't use it yourself.
That's a really good way to put it. Receptive vocabulary, words and phrases you understand when you encounter them, is just as valuable as the language you actively use. You don't have to say, make greater use of, but when you see it, you shouldn't have to slow down.
I like that distinction. Understand it everywhere, use it where it fits.
That's how language actually works. You absorb far more than you actively use.
Can I ask you something that's a little sideways from all of this?
Of course.
Do you think reading this carefully, really slowly, really carefully, changes how you feel about what you're reading?
I think yes. I think it does.
Because I've been sitting here for however long it's been, and I feel quite different about this article than I did at 8 this morning.
I felt the same thing when I first went through it properly. There's a word for what happens when something important slips through the cracks of your attention, and reading this slowly, I kept thinking, that's what we do. That's what most of us do most of the time.
We read displaced, and we don't stop on it.
We read displaced and we move to the next word. But if you stop, even for 1 second, you realize that word contains an entire human experience. People who did not choose to leave, people whose roots were pulled up, people whose daily routines, whose neighbors, whose sense of home just stopped existing the way it was.
And uprooted captures that more viscerally than displaced does.
It does. Displaced sounds administrative. Uprooted sounds human.
I'll never read past either of those words again.
That's the thing about learning language carefully. Once you understand what a word actually means, not just the translation, but the weight of it, you can't unknow that.
Is that why you became a journalist? To not look away from the weight of things?
Partly yes, and partly because I think language is one of the most honest things we have. If you read it carefully enough, it tells you the truth.
Even when it's uncomfortable.
Especially then.
What will you write for your piece?
I don't know yet. I think I need to sit with it a little longer. Some things shouldn't be rushed into words.
That slipped my mind. The idea that not everything needs to be said immediately.
That's a very good use of that phrase.
I'm learning.
You always were. You just needed to slow down.
One headline, 40 minutes.
And look at everything that was in it. Nearly and around, displaced and uprooted, escalates and halted, linked to and along with and echoing. Every word was chosen. Every word meant something.
Every word meant something. I think I'll read more slowly from now on.
That's all any of us can do. Start there. Read the words, let them land, and then decide what to do with what you've understood.
Thank you for not letting me just get away with the headline.
You're welcome. Now go and read the whole article, slowly.
I will, starting from the top.
Good. And when you're done, tell me what you think the most important word in it is.
I already know.
Do you?
Alone. In Lebanon, alone. That one word changes the entire scale of what you're reading.
Yes, it does.